Hello, and welcome to FI for Kids, the podcast about starting and guiding your kids on the path to financial independence. I'm your host, Dominic Delacqua. Today's show is a conversation with Douglas Hoggett. Doug owns and operates Bodywise Physical Therapy in Boise, Idaho, and he's also the father of an 18-year-old son. Today we're going to discuss their journey so far with money management and investing. Welcome, Doug, and thanks for coming on the FI for Kids podcast. Let's dive right in and talk about your financial journey so far with your son. What is it that you want for him in terms of money?
Well, there's kind of a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is that I want him to be in control of his money, and I want him to know how to use it wisely. And, I want him to have enough so that he can afford a life to support him and, God willing, his family. That's kind of the short answer. I think as a parent, we all want our children to be, let's say, reasonably well off so that they can support themselves and support a family. And so, without any undue stress that's usually brought upon by self-inflicted wounds, so to speak. There's always, things that are beyond our control, a stock market crash, economic downturn and all of these things. But to the extent that you can control your own finances and make wise decisions, that's really what I want them to be able to do, with money.
Okay, that's good. I want to circle back around to something in a minute, but first, let me ask, what have you taught him then so far?
Well, he just turned 18. And in the last couple of years, I guess, because of his maturity level, obviously he's been growing up. And so the nature of our conversations has been, I guess, more adult. And so what I've taught him is that as he's looking ahead in his life, that he has basically three resources to manage, and money is one of them. What I mean by that is he's got time, health, and money, and the three things are really interrelated. And so as a young man or a young person, uh, he's got plenty of time, but probably not much money, right? Whereas somebody in my situation, ready to turn 60, you know, I might have, relatively speaking, plenty of money, but maybe not so much time. And so, and then of course, health plays into all of these things too. And so I have really taught him the idea that we are stewards of our time, stewards of our health, and stewards of our finances. And how that plays out in terms of managing money, I've taught him the very basics of managing money, and a lot of it has been kind of situational, meaning situations will come up and it'll be a teaching moment, or you want to buy a video game, okay, well, you can't just buy a video game, you got to save for it. Or when he was 9, for example, I had Disneyland had sent me a vacation package DVD, or vacation planning DVD.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me about this. It was a whole thing you guys did together to like, okay, well, Disneyland is going to be expensive. It's X amount of money. And then you work together to like when he was 10, right? Or going on 10 to like save for it and like plan a trip to Disneyland. So that's a that's a great specific example, something you guys did that was situational.
Right. And that was a long-term planning thing, because basically he had looked at that DVD, and he just made the comment, goes, "Hey dad, next dad weekend, let's go to Disneyland." I'm like, "Well, it doesn't work that way."
Yeah.
So we planned, and we went to the bank, we opened up a savings account, and we made a habit of going to the bank physically and making a deposit every 2 weeks. We went to the travel agent and we planned, well, how much is it going to cost, how much. And so we had planned it over a period of a little over a year and a half.
Yeah.
And
That's great.
and then and at one point he wanted to stay in the hotels that are on site. They have hotels that are, on the campus of Disneyland, and then they have hotels that are just outside of Disneyland. And if you wanted to stay at that time, this was 2017, I think, 2016, 2017, it cost $600 a night to stay in a hotel in the park. In the park. But if you stayed in a hotel outside the park, I think it was 150, right?
Yeah, quite a big
Right.
difference.
So, and I just told him, I said, look, we can stay in the park, but if we do that, instead of going in April, we'll have to wait until December. It's up to you. I mean, I don't care. It's up to you. But
Yeah.
and yeah, let's just go in April. So he made this his choice.
So that's great, right? So here's, I mean, great because that's how it works when you're an adult in real life, right? It's like, well, I could do these things, but what's the cost going to be? And, and how much longer is that going to take me to get there? And one of the things with FI, and you kind of touched on this, right? Early on when you were saying, you mentioned sort of three things, right? Health, time, and money, and they're all interrelated. And that's all extremely true with FI, right? Like you can't plan a life sort of financial independence without identifying what it is that you really value and what you want to have money for and how you want to spend that money, right? Because it's not resources are not unlimited for the vast majority of us, so we have to make choices. But if you know yourself, you invest in knowing yourself and what really sort of brings you joy, then it makes it easier to make those decisions, right? I mean, so th that's kind of a more sophisticated sort of way of looking at it as you get older and you have more responsibilities. But I think what you were teaching him, what you guys went through with that example of the hotels in the park or outside the park is the same type of thing, just appropriate for someone that's 10, right? So yeah,
Right.
I think that's great.
Right. And then as he's gotten older, then we got more into, real day-to-day money management, right? So um what I did do when he was in junior high school, I want to say when he was in eighth grade, um, we did a Dave Ramsey course together. It was an online kind of his kind of approach to financial management, basic money management, and it was tailored towards someone in junior high school. And so again, it was not investment, but it was just okay. How do we manage our money, right? Um, and and then in terms of investment, we've just really that's been more situational as well. I remember a few years ago, I don't know, my son's really into video games, right? And there was a big story in the news where um, a bunch of investors tried to short GameStop.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Remember that? And GameStop, the video game people rallied and saved GameStop, and he was like, "What is this all about, Dad? I'm hearing all about about GameStop." And so that gave us an opportunity to talk about the stock market and investment, and explaining what shorting was, so to speak. And it also gave it a kind of a way into talking about compound interest. When I was younger, somebody posed to me, and I posed the same question to Jackson when he was younger. Someone asked me when I was in grade school, I think, it's like, what would you rather have, $1 million, or would you like to have someone who pays you a penny a day and then doubles it every day for 30 days, right? And and the idea was to show you how interest compounds. And I don't remember what the exact amount is, but by the end of 30 days, getting paid you start off one penny, but by the time you get to the end of that 30 days, you're in multi-millions of dollars, right? That has really been maybe, we're talking more and more about investment lately, right? Because he just turned 18, so we're talking about opening like an IRA for him at 18, something like that. So we've looked at like financial calculators, for example, and you know, what happens if you invest $100 now, starting at 18 to your 60, or if you do that, starting when you're 30, things like that.
That's great. I love that you guys are starting to have those kind of conversations. And the penny doubling every day for 30 days turns out to be 5.3 million. Of course, that's also 100% rate of return, which is not a normal thing in the real world, but still, it's a great example to make the point to kids. And actually, while we're on the topic of compound interest, for our listeners, if you sign up for our newsletter, just go to fiforkids.com. There is a simple compound interest tool that you can use to show your kids just a quick visual of how compound interest works. And there you can play around with that some. And then as you sort of put in different amounts that they're saving, then they can see what that effect is over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So it's a fun tool and a great way for parents and kids to start to have
Yeah.
those conversations together. Also in that tool is a simple money management tool that you sort of use ongoing throughout the month just to sort of track where you're at with your money coming in and your money going out. So it helps them understand the importance of paying attention to their money and knowing what they're spending it on. So if they want to put more money into savings to invest, for example, after looking at that compound interest calculator, then they can look at where they're spending money and that helps them decide, oh, you know what? Like I'm spending more than I thought on, going to McDonald's or Burger King or whatever it is, and I'm gonna do less of that because then I can put, you know, 25 more dollars or 50 more dollars a month into savings and investing, and that means 10 years from now, whatever the numbers are, and the calculator does all that for you. So for anybody who signs up for our newsletter. So anyway, and then the other thing I was going to say, what's his interest level been when you're having those conversations with him? Is he kind of like biting pretty well, or does he just kind of listen and he sometimes kind of cares and sometimes not others, or what's his how does that go?
I would say that in the moment he's interested,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right? And then the distractions of the day carry him away, and I don't know how much carryover there is to that, but I would say that's more my fault or my issue as a parent rather than his as a high school student.
That's always tough. Yeah, I mean, all right, that's I think as parents we always kind of think those things and when we could do better and there's truth in that I think, right? What if we did this, that, or the other? That's one of the reasons why I mentioned that tool. There's a simple device in there to teach your kids how to track their money, right? And you can do that with them once a week or once every other week, and it shouldn't take more than about 15 minutes. But then on the other hand, sometimes kids just aren't at a point where they are ready to hear things. It's always a little different, and some people have figured out ways to kind of get through, and kids' personalities are different. So I just think part of this podcast and talking about FI for kids and teaching your kids these things is also what's the best way or what are different ways to try and approach kids with different personalities or kids at different ages, right? So, where he may be interested now in the moment. Maybe there's something you could sort of do different if to be more consistent, or maybe it's just that, he needs another couple of years more independence and then it matters. Just curious. Are you doing anything? So you talk about it still situationally, but you're not doing anything where you're having like a consistent, you're talking once a week or once a month or whatever about kind of money management or investing.
Uh, Money management, yes, not investing. And that's just because, he's had like a Saturday morning job bussing tables at a cafe. And so, the money that he makes from that, then we talk about it. And okay, how much do you have in your savings account? And what are you spending your money on? And what are you saving up for? I spend it on pizza and a movie, or I'm saving up for a video, or, I'm just saying, right?
Yeah. Does he have a set amount that you guys have discussed or that you've set for him that he has to sort of put aside in savings, or is it just it's a flexible thing kind of ongoing that you guys discuss?
Well, the way that we have done it is the way we kind of split up his income, so to speak, is 10% goes towards tithing, 40% goes towards savings, and then 50% goes towards discretionary spending, so to speak, right? So that way he's always saving at least, now he's not making a whole lot, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. You're teaching them that habit because that's pretty much what we do. We don't have the tithing component, but we started with the kids when they were little, setting their money kind of into sort of three buckets, right? And then we, as they got a little bit older, so this when they were fairly small, and it was they had to put half their money aside for long-term savings, and the other half was you can spend it now, and then the other half of that half, right? So two 25% piles went to like both saving for trips and stuff. Because otherwise, when they were little, one of them in particular would his money would always burn a hole in his pocket, and then he wouldn't have any money when we would, take a vacation. And then as they got a little older and better with that, then we just sort of split it. Okay, you've got two piles. 50% goes into savings right up front. And then the rest you spend however you want. So if you don't save it for trips, you're not going to have money to buy. But and they figured that part out good on their own. One of them just started working, and the other is still young enough that he's still just dealing with allowance. But it's still you're establishing that habit, right? And then we're talking about why, and then kind of showing them what that means, kind of sort of long term. And I think that stuff is super useful for kids, right? Because you're kind of combining a little bit of, well, you're just having those conversations about things that matter, even though they sometimes act like they don't want to hear it. They've actually been pretty good with their stuff, or sometimes they'll complain, well, why do I have to give 50% of my money away? It's like, well, you're not. It's still yours. You're just making it work for you, so on and so forth. But so I think that's great. That's great that you guys are that you're doing that. I think that's awesome.
What he does is similar. The way we look at it, and it sounds like it's similar to what you're talking about with the different buckets there is the 40% that goes to savings, that's kind of long-term savings, long-term emergency fund, so to speak. And 50% that's his, he can either spend it as he sees fit, or if there's really something that you want to buy that you can't afford,
Video game.
a video game, then you're going to have to take part of that 50% and put it aside to save for that, right?
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly.
Kind of like although yours sounds a little bit more disciplined, like maybe 25% they can spend it now and 25% they have to save for.
No, that was only early on when they were pretty
Oh,
little.
okay, okay.
No, we haven't done that for, I don't know, it's been probably 4 or 5 years
Oh,
now. So it's two piles. One is long-term savings that, we've started helping them invest, right? And the other 50% they spend however they want. For example, just recently wanted to get a VR headset, right? Because some of his friends had one. So he knows he's got to do that on his own, and he looks around and he starts searching for stuff, and he figures out what the price is, and then he's like, well, hey, I'm a little behind on allowance because you haven't paid me because we're slackers that way. It's like, so how much do I have coming? And he's counting up the money that he has, and he decided in this case he was pretty much going to spend all the money that he had left lying around minus $5. But that was his choice, right? But he looked around to like find a good deal, and he like, found one that was used from eBay because it was less expensive. And so, right, and we helped him with all that stuff. But then he made that choice. So now, right, if he wants to go, with his buddies down to the corner to the stinker station and or to the Dairy Queen, if he doesn't have money, then he's out of luck until, he gets sort of more allowance coming in. But that was his choice. So, and he doesn't always do that, but he did in this case. And he's made two big purchases like that in the last year or two. One was an Xbox that he wanted, and we helped him with a little bit of that, but not much. He did most of it. And he plays that all the time, and he does it with his friends. And then the headset he's used not as much, but what's been cool, especially during summer, is that his sister has played, and so then that's encouraged them to like spend time together. And she actually gave him some money to buy some games that she wanted and stuff. So the whole thing worked out like great. You're like, he's learning about money and spending it on stuff that, I mean, I wouldn't spend my money that way, but to him, it's important, and he gets a lot of value out of it, at least at this age. So it was both of those have been good decisions. Then there's the whole interpersonal interaction he's having with his sister, in addition to kind of the remote stuff with his friends. So I don't know. I think all of that kind of sort of fits together kind of nicely. So I'm going to circle back around to kind of something I wanted to touch on with your first answer. And so you've talked with him some about money, and you were saying your goals or your thoughts for him is to be able to, support himself and support his family and whatnot without having to kind of sort of worry about things. Have you talked about the idea of financial stability and given that any sort of a definition? Because one of the things that I've found pretty useful in the last several years, and I was already thinking this way, and I got this concept as a defined thing from Grant Sabatier in his book Financial Freedom, and he actually got some of these categories from somebody else. I don't remember who. I'd have to look it up, but he talked about the idea of financial stability on your path to financial independence, so to speak, and is that you are at a point where you've got 6 months or more of savings so that if something happens and you lose your job or whatever, or some emergency comes up, you're not all of a sudden stressing for money. And how important that is to just ease a lot of potential stress out of your daily reality. So is that something you've discussed with Jackson in a specific sense like that?
Yeah.
I think that's super important.
Well, in terms of starting the whole saving process, where we talk about 40%, right? The initial goal was $1,000, right?
Hmm.
And then after that, the goal was to have, ideally it would be 6 months, right, worth of living expenses saved. But, in his sense, I said, at least 3 months. But I explained to him the whole idea of, you can have 3 to 6 months saved, right? Now, he doesn't have very many living expenses, but I put it in terms of my life so that if I'm an adult and I've got 6 months of living expenses saved up, there's a lot less stress if something happens and I lose my job, or I'm sick and I can't work, or maybe I'm in a job and they want me to do something that I don't agree with. I don't have to feel
Trapped.
trapped. Exactly. The message that I wanted to get across to him is that really, financial stability, as you say, is independence.
Yeah, it's kind of the starting point towards independence. I mean, you can build on it from there, of course, and get to the point where you've got sort of this abundant wealth and
Yes.
even more possibilities, and you don't have to work if you don't want to. But certainly, it's one of the first major milestones on that path. And I mean, even if that's all you ever do, and you like your job, and you just keep working your job, but you have that backup there. It's still like you're
Yeah.
saying, it takes so much stress out of your reality.
Oh, well, this is me, right?
Yeah, having lived for a long time, not like that, being a moron, speaking of myself here. So that's great. That's great that you're teaching them that now.
Part of my, again, I've said that, my son is 18. Part of the financial education at this stage is, I can honestly say, look, if you want to succeed, at least with money, all you have to do is look what I did and, really do differently, right? Like, these are my mistakes,
Yeah,
but I got zero financial education. And so I suffered my way through life unnecessarily, and it's my fault. I'm not blaming anyone, right? It's what I'm saying. But what I'm getting at is my son has the benefit of learning from my mistakes, right?
sure. Yeah. Well, and also, right, the fact that you're making a point to have these conversations and teach him. And then you guys have been having these conversations to one extent or another, right, since he was 10, right? Since at least that Disneyland trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is a great way to, if anybody out there has younger kids and you're trying to figure out how to talk to them more about money and you're not sure how to sort of get them interested, right? You can look for those kind of opportunities when it's something that, oh, they're going to value and it costs money instead of just not discussing any of that with them, right? What you did, I think, was really smart and a great, right? So you were able to teach them about money, but then it was also something the two of you worked on together, right? How to plan. So you're not just teaching about money, but you're also teaching him about planning and about making choices. I mean, and all those things, right? And you guys are doing that all in collaboration. So there's so many things that come out of it all at the same time, right? So anybody out there listening, if you've got kids that are younger and you're trying to figure out how do I get them to even bother to pay attention, look for things that they're interested in, right? Whether it's Disneyland or it's Luke with the Xbox or, whatever it is for them that matters, then you can start to have those conversations. And I think so many times, at least when you and I were growing up, people didn't talk about money. I find it really interesting that we, as parents, teach our kids so many different things, right? You teach them how to throw a ball or how to ride a bike or how to drive a car or how to be respectful to other people, or you help them with their homework. But then so much of the time, so many people don't teach their kids really much, if anything at all, about managing their money, and certainly not sort of beyond that, right? Then how to invest that money when they do have a surplus. And I don't know if that's because they just didn't learn it, like we didn't learn it, or if it's just not some, if there's still a little bit of a stigma. Well, you don't want to talk about money, or I'm not sure. But I think it's interesting because I think, right, I think there's so much benefit, not just in terms of money and the financial stability we talked about, but also in tying all that together with what you value and creating a life for yourself that you're really happy with, and you're not just chasing the next distraction and spending all your money on this, that, or the other that doesn't really add any happiness to your life for more than a few minutes of that oxytocin hit, and then you're on to the next thing. But really finding what gives you long-term value and then choosing to spend your money on that and invest the rest so that you've got more and more opportunities as you go through life. So I don't know, any thoughts on your end before we wrap up as to why, just in general, we seem to not have done a good job just as a culture and teaching our kids about money?
I've thought about that a lot actually, and my situation is a little different. I think yes, maybe our parents' generation didn't talk about money. I don't know. I can't generalize too much. I can
Sure.
say that growing up for me, the conversations around money where we don't have any, right?
Sure,
And
sure.
so, like when I was in elementary school, my dad worked two jobs because we didn't have any money, right?
Yeah.
And then from like 1978 to 1981, about 3 years, he was unemployed.
Wow. That's a huge, long stretch.
And so money was very tight.
Yeah.
And you know, I was in junior high school, and in end of junior high school, the first 2 years of high school, and that was really rough. And um, so I've carried I would say like if I'm honest, I'm just say a fear of money, right?
Sure.
So coming back to what we had talked about before, I've tried to make up a little bit for my deficits, but then also I haven't been the greatest model, let's say until maybe the last 7 to 10 years, really. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think so. I mean, right, because what it does sort of take me back around to is just that idea of financial stability, right? And without some level of financial stability, because, you know, the way I grew up, we were financially stable. I don't know how much money sort of they had, but it wasn't like we weren't wealthy by any stretch. And my parents were careful with how they spent their money, but we never had a lack for basic things, certainly. It just wasn't something that was talked about in any depth. But your situation, someone who comes from at least periods where, you're kind of really sort of looking at a poverty situation, it's hard to have conversations about money maybe because your dad was so focused on just survival. Then where do you even begin to start to have conversations? And, I'm sure he felt like, well, maybe he didn't feel like he was the one to be trying to teach you that stuff since he was struggling anyway. Or maybe he wasn't even thinking about any of that because he was just trying to figure out how to make it from paying his bills one month to the next. So, I think those things are real, but then it just reinforces this idea of, without financial stability, life is supremely more difficult, I think.
In my life, and I carried my ignorance about money into foolish habits. And every decision has a consequence, and at some point, even I could learn from the consequences, right? And so I've had to kind of change things, and that's why I'm trying to teach my son from the get-go that he doesn't have to repeat the things that I did.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I think let's wrap it up there. Thanks a lot for the conversation and kind of opening up about where you guys are at, and what you're working on with him. So thank you very much, Doug, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the FI for Kids podcast. Please subscribe and follow the show. That helps get the word out to other parents and kids that are interested in pursuing their journey towards financial independence, and it also helps us continue to attract interesting guests. Our intro music is provided courtesy of Douglas Cameron. You can catch Doug at douglascameron.net. And our exit music is courtesy of the Zoo Human Project. You can catch them on Facebook. Thanks again, and we'll talk next week.
And now we've tripped into the next thing. Life was once the standard of the day. Now most rot in the material plane, with art on the back burner and makeup in the microwave. How can a world full of flavor be so painfully bland? What should we do? Redefine value. Satiate the end of you. Oh, yeah. Let the music move you. It's better late. It's better late than never. It's better late. It's better late to purify this polluted stream. Leave our suits on the bankside, let our souls get swept away.